Okay, this is take 2 on an introduction to basically the syntax of a procedure in PL SQL. This particular video is to help you get started on the first problem in the lab in particular. That's a big hint. So what I'm starting with here, and didn't do this intentionally, but since I'm on the screen, I'll go ahead and talk about it. This is how you use it. So when you create a procedure, a stored procedure in particular, when you have a name, you store it, it shows up as an object over here. Let me see if I can show that. This window of all your objects over here, there's a procedures. So I've got several that I've done in the lab, so I've got several of those in here. So when you create it, it'll save it under that name, so you can use it whenever you want to in your database. In this case, what this one does, let me say what it does first. And I didn't do this in my first take, but I think I will now, just to give you more of an insight of what's going on. I'm working in this one with the this caps lock's on, that's by accident. I'm working with the charter table. So if you remember what that is, it's just flights that are chartered. In particular, the fields, or the attributes, the column names, the columns we're working with in this one are the primary key, chart trip, and distance. So what the point of this is to, like, say you have a different, like, maybe allowable distance that you want to check for some flights that were within a certain distance for some reason or another. So what this procedure does is it takes the primary key and it checks to see if the flight that was taken for that charter under that particular primary key, for instance, for 10,001, the distance flown was 936. So let's say you wanted to see if it was within a certain limit, like 500, for instance. That's what this does. It's just a distance check for whatever particular flight and whatever the distance was. So kind of think of that as a limit. If it's above that limit, you say the limit's exceeded. If it's below it, it was not exceeded. So that's the point of this the particular procedure. This is what the syntax looks like. So the syntax is going to look like this. It's going to be create or replace. That kind of helps. It doesn't have to. By the way, I'm inconsistent with my capitalization. Probably, if you want to follow the convention, all these blue parts should be all caps. Just get kind of lazy, but it works either way. But so create or replace procedure. It'll create the procedure, which means it will store it, like you saw over there in that list of objects. If it already exists, the replace means it overrides it. So it's easier to develop if you add the word replace. It'll give it a name. So distance check is the name of this one, and as you can see over here, distance check should exist somewhere here. Maybe it doesn't. It's probably not actually up to date from when I created it, but it'll appear under your procedures once you get refreshed. Anyway, so you have that, and you have parentheses, and then you have parameters. The parameters will have names plus their data type. The easiest thing I've noticed with these is that if you're actually working with a parameter that relates directly to a field in your database table, it's easiest to just use this syntax in the particular table and the column name and then this percent type. That will make it the same type. The parameter will be the same type as the field in the database that it's linked, it's bound to, basically. This other parameter is not directly related to the database. It's the limit that we're going to put. It's kind of like our query parameter. So you just have to put the proper data type for that, in this case number. So everything's in parentheses. Think of this as part here. What you're doing is kind of declaring a variable that you use with your query. So this is saying there's going to be a variable called delimit. It's going to get like kind of the result of a query. And then everything else is between these begin and end keywords with a semicolon. And what's between these is going to vary a lot depending on your procedure. But for like this simple one, what we have is that basic query. Well, it's not the. Let me show it since I was talking about it before. We'll go back to another window. Instead of select star, we'll do the actual query that we kind of have this based on. I'll make it specifically 1001 there, or 10,001. So if you run this query, it should give you the distance that that flight took for that particular charter. So if you want to relate this to this procedure, this parameter can be that second argument, this sit in the procedure that we saw, or is that right here? It's that second argument. The into is the part that's different. If you're doing a select statement for most of these procedures, you're going to select into the variable, so you get the result in there. It'll be one value, in this case a number. Later on in future problems in this lab, there'll be instances where you want one value, but it's like concatenating a bunch of fields together. So keep that in mind as a tip for the future. Anyway, for this one, we're going to read in that distance, that one we got here. Where is it here? 936 is basically going to go into delimit for this particular charter. And then the rest of the syntax is very familiar if you're using programming language. So I'm just saying if the parameter, if what the query returns is bigger than the parameter that was given, then I output is above the limit, and otherwise it was below the limit. And then you make sure you just regard the syntax, look this up in the videos or the book, or pause this video and make sure you've got the semicolons and stuff in the right places and you have everything balanced. And then that's just the end of the procedure. So when you run this, we click the green button here, it'll kind of compile the procedure. By the way, the pencil eraser deletes what's already there so you can see run it again. So if you get that, it doesn't mean necessarily did it right. It could have logical errors, but it's a good sign that you don't have any syntax errors, obviously, because they compile. And going back to where you use it, it's call, name of procedure, and whatever parameters you want to send it. So make sure you don't have anything highlighted, and click the green button. And the output, since it has that output, let me show this, erase everything here and run it again. You'll have your output show up in your DBMS output that we talked about before.